Hey guys, so in this video I'm going to be comparing some of the most popular stretch resolutions in Fortnite. If you don't know much about stretch resolutions and its benefits, you should definitely go watch my other video where I explain literally everything you need to know about stretch res in Fortnite. The way this video is going to work is I'm going to show the field of view or the FOV of each resolution, how enemies appear on it from different distances, and then do a minute or two of build battling on it. I'll also be discussing my personal experiences on each of the resolutions and just some popular players that play on each. I'm going to put timestamps for each resolution I go over on the screen now, so if you're looking for a specific res, you don't have to sit through the other ones. I'll start with native and then we'll go more stretched all the way to 1080 by 1080. The resolution that I currently use is 1680 by 1080, which we won't cover, but it's pretty similar to 1600. So let's begin with native resolution. Native res is the same as 1920 by 1080, and it's called native because that's just the game's default resolution. Its aspect ratio is 16:9, and as you can see, your FOV allows you to see a little less than 5 blocks up the wall. This will be the wall that we will use to compare FOVs for each resolution. But as you can see and tell, native feels and looks the most zoomed in, and that's just simply because its aspect ratio is the biggest. However, native also has the most pixels, and as you can see here, enemies appear clearest on this resolution. Console, mobile, and Switch players are all locked into native resolution, and native is popular for content creators and Twitch streamers because of how clear and nice the game looks compared to a lot of the more stretch resolutions. Personally, I've been playing on numerous different stretch resolutions since I began playing on PC, so to me, native just feels terrible to play on. I feel like I can't see anything because I'm so used to the extra FOV from stretched, and while the game does look nicer, the character models just feel lankier and slower. The one thing I do like about native is how clear the crosshair is, but other than that, it's definitely my least favorite resolution out of all the ones that we'll cover. Something to take into account is that while you are at a disadvantage to stretched from the lack of FOV, there are still a ton of amazing players like Tfue, Cloak, Nate Hill, Ghost Kayun, TSM Cowboy, and more. Previously, Epic didn't allow stretch resolutions in competitions, so tournaments were played on native, but the recent Secret Skirmish actually allowed for players to play on 4 different stretch resolutions, so this might be the end of seeing competitive and pro players play on native unless they are a big content creator as well. Overall, if you're trying to improve and be competitive, native probably isn't for you, but if you're an aspiring content creator, you probably want a resolution as close to native as you can get. Next up is 1600 by 1080. This is a perfect middle ground for content and competitive play. As you can see with 1600 by 1080, our FOV allows us to see 5.5 blocks up the wall. With 1600 by 1080, your crosshair and opponent will both be nearly as clear as with native. This is a perfect stretch resolution if you're switching from native for a few reasons. First, you'll be able to experience the FOV boost and see which you prefer, stretched or native. Obviously, this is one of the least stretch resolutions you can get, but it's still nice. And the other reason is that your eyes will take some time to adjust to stretch res, so you don't want to dive into one of the really stretch resolutions that we'll cover later, like 1154 or 1080 by 1080. Overall, I think everyone should try this resolution, especially if you're looking for a perfect middle ground between having the FOV and competitive advantage, and then your game also still looking good and clear and not really pixelated at all. Now to one of my favorite stretch resolutions, 1444 by 1080. If you haven't gotten the pattern yet, the more stretched our resolution is, the higher our vertical FOV will be, as now we can see just under 6 blocks up the wall. 1444 is the first stretch resolution where the opponents will become slightly pixelated and not as clear as on native or 1600. Originally people used 1444 by 1080, which is a 4:3 aspect ratio, but after people discovered that 1444 had a much clearer and more distinct crosshair, now a lot of people seem to prefer that over 1440. I used 1444 for a few months after playing on 1280, as it looked a little better for content, but still not as good as the higher resolutions. 1444 is probably the least stretched you can get if you really want the biggest competitive advantage. Many pros like Liquid Vivid and Liquid Poach use 1444 or 1440 because of the nice FOV as well as the extra FPS that you'll get compared to native. I personally really liked 1444 as it wasn't too hard to look at and it felt more fluid and smooth than when I played on native. Overall, if you're looking for a sweaty resolution but you don't really feel comfortable on the insanely stretched res like 1154 or 1080 by 1080, then 1444 or 1440 is definitely worth experimenting with. Now we can begin with the really sweaty resolutions, starting off with 1350 by 1080. Using our FOV test, we can see 6 1/4 blocks up the wall. Now you should be able to see a huge difference in how your opponent appears from when on this compared to native. 1350 by 1080 is a 5:4 aspect ratio, and funnily enough, I used to play on 1280 by 1024, which is the same aspect ratio, it's just less pixels. This is my second ever stretched resolution after 1600 by 1080, and I use it mainly because of Ghost Bizzle. Bizzle, who is in my opinion one of the best Fortnite players in the world, used this res after he used it a lot on CSGO, but to me it just felt really smooth after I used it. The added FPS for having less pixels and just everything about the resolution felt really good to me back in Season 5. This also didn't look terrible for content creation, so give it a shot if you're looking for a less popular resolution. 1350 by 1080 and 1280 by 1024 give you a good middle ground in really stretched resolutions where you can still have decent long range aim and you get all the benefits of a really stretched res. .1280 by 1080 is a relatively new res that has become popular. It allows us to see 6 1/2 blocks up the wall and is pretty similar to 1350 for how enemies appear. 1280 by 1080 is different than 1280 by 1024 though, because it's more stretched as its aspect ratio is smaller. A lot of pros, including Martos, have recently started using this res because it's a nice middle ground for the really stretched resolutions, kind of like 1350. So as you get more stretched, your building and editing will definitely feel nicer and smoother, but your long range aim will suffer. 1280 by 1080 seems to give you the best of both worlds if you're looking for a really stretched resolution. The last note is that if you use 1279 by 1080, you'll get a much clearer and more distinct crosshair than using 1280 by 1080, similar to the 1444 versus 1440 crosshair difference. If you're looking for a really stretched resolution, just definitely try out 1280 by 1080. While you can see the gameplay here, you definitely should try it out yourself before you pick which one you're going to stick with. Now we can go on to 1154 by 1080. This is the resolution that Liquid Chap and Liquid 72 Hours made popular, and for good reason. As we can see, our FOV is absolutely insane, and we can see just over 7 blocks up the wall. The only bad part is that this is when your opponents start really looking pixelated on your screen. I've never played on a resolution this stretched in my life, but I can definitely feel the advantage to it. On this resolution, my editing and building felt insanely smooth, and I just felt like I could see everything. Even after playing on 1444, which is a pretty stretched resolution, 1154 just makes you feel like you never want to go off of it because of how good your FOV and FPS is. Obviously, my AR shots and my long range aim was pretty bad after this. Was it terrible compared to native? No, but just trust me when I say it's a lot easier to hit a full clear body out of the sky than it is to hit a blob of pixels out of the sky. Personally, this would be the most stretched I would ever go, but I have one more res to show you guys, and it's something that a lot of you guys seem to play on and talk about in the comments. So what's the final res? Well, if you guessed 1080 by 1080, then you're right. The FOV on this res is absolutely insane. We can see a total of 7.5 blocks up the wall. Of course there's a downside, and that's that my opponent literally looks like a pixel from far away. I can't make out any part of their body or see what is what. This is the res that Mongrel used for a few weeks and made popular, but ended up switching off of it because how bad it looked on stream. You can technically go more stretched than this because the aspect ratio is 1:1, so you can go lower, like something like 900 by 1080, but it will look pretty similar to this. What a lot of people do is they actually play on 1079 by 1080 because it gives them a bit of a nicer crosshair. When playing on this res, I sometimes lost track of my crosshair because of how faded it was, but if you're looking to become a mini Mongrel sweatlord, 1080 by 1080 will make your editing and building feel absolutely amazing, and plus it's pretty good for bad computers because of how little pixels it is. So these are all the popular stretch resolutions that you'll find. If you guys enjoyed the video, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications. This video took a while to make, so shout out to Kazaki who helped me make this video. This video shoutouts go to Peyton Woods, Alexander Jevtik, and XXX Depression, who all use my code itsJerian in the Fortnite item shop. Remember, if you guys want a shoutout, just send a pic of you using my code to my Twitter or Instagram, which you should all be following anyways. So that's it for me, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Later.